I was gonna say
I was gonna say we haven't got a notification on my
before
phone.
we get too far into
There
it.
we go. Now we're live. Let's do that again.
Mhm.
Welcome to this week's episode of Trek Live, episode 120. We're talking about some TOS. Take two, Bill. How you doing this morning?
I'm hanging in there. I'm trying to abide by all the recommendations that are out there to kind of lay low and avoid crowds and
Yeah.
uh, do a lot of extra stuff. So I'm kind of just, you know, waiting this whole thing out and hoping for the best. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to getting some sense of normalcy by sitting here talking to you about Star Trek
Yep.
for an hour or so. Yeah.
I think that's the best thing we can do. We just talk about something that we both love, Star Trek and TOS, a little bit of escapism. And I think starting a good conversation. I just think it's just what the doctor ordered for all of us.
Agreed.
Before we jump into the main topic at hand, Bill, how is your rewatch going?
It's going slow but surely, slowly but surely. I'm watching. I'm still in TOS season. No, I'm in TNG season 3. Uh, I watched yesterday's Enterprise in recent days, which I think I've said a few times on here in other conversations. I guess that that's in the
Classic.
running for my like favorite episode of Star Trek, like
Yeah.
single episode, 1 hour shot of Trek. Like I said in my review on Twitter, my little one tweet uh, reaction sum up of my thoughts. I think it does everything Star Trek is kind of intended to do. It's focused on the characters, it moves characters forward, it builds on the greater Star Trek universe, like it builds the mythology of it all and adds to the continuity of the whole story, and it has a clearly unique and fresh take on like a science fiction concept. Like it's time travel, but it's not traditional time travel. It's not let's go back in time and change the past or fix the past. It's a unique spin on that. It comes up with a new way to explore a sci-fi concept.
Yeah.
So it checks every single box for me. It's sort of the in my mind like the tent pole like prototypical example of like perfect Star Trek in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, great performances, the production design and the cinematography of the alternate Enterprise D,
Mm-hmm.
particularly on the bridge, I think is just, especially in high def, uh, really really gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, definitely. I'm confident in say top 10 episode, maybe top 5 episode. Probably all time. It's just a great episode, like you said, all around. It's got everything.
Yeah, and the way I mean, the way it capitalizes on sort of the mixed feelings left by the way they handled the Tasha Yar, like whether or
Stuff.
not you think, yeah, whether or not you find the sudden come out of nowhere end of her character satisfying or not, like on either end of that spectrum, yesterday's Enterprise is going to either build on your satisfaction of that, or it's going to maybe correct or give you some added it might repair some of the damage done by that choice for how to handle the death of Tasha Yar.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty difficult thing to do. I don't think it undermines either take, because I find, especially as the years have gone on, that choice for how to handle that death is somewhat divisive. I think it's becoming a little bit more accepted.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when I was a kid, it was pretty generally panned that people didn't like the suddenness of it, the arbitrariness of it, the come out of nowhere, like lack of build up of it. But I think as TV has changed and character deaths have become more kind of status quo, I think the way that they did it feels a little bit more in line with how other TV shows do it too.
Yeah.
So it's less out of nowhere and less of an anomaly today than it was. But no matter how you sit on it, I think yesterday's Enterprise capitalizes on your feelings and and moves that story forward when it's a dead character.
Yeah.
It's a character that we haven't seen in a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and it finds a way to add to that whole storyline and make it even more interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, it's an early example of Star Trek building on a previous episode. Like, we
Yeah,
talked about Discovery and now Picard, where these episodes bring a different layer or a different aspect to the previous episode, and I think
sure.
that's similar what we got here,
Hmm.
but early on, which is cool. But
Definitely. Yeah, yesterday's
yeah,
Enterprise is always one that when I've done episodes on like Trek ranks, and we've kind of done similar conversations here, like how would you introduce Star Trek to a new person?
yeah,
And like I just said, I think yesterday's Enterprise really is sort of like the prototypical in a package. This is what Star Trek can do.
yeah.
But at the same time, I probably wouldn't use it to introduce somebody new because I think a lot of the emotional resonance comes from knowing who Tasha
Seeing,
Yar
yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah,
the surprise of I think that episode's more satisfying if you get to it, kind of watching it either fully sequentially, like getting through the first season, seeing Tasha there, seeing her die,
yeah,
and then going through a year and a half of her not being there. At the end of that teaser, when Picard turns around and Tasha Yar standing on the bridge, that surprise
mm-hmm.
is obviously going to mean more to you if you've done that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't use it as an introductory episode. I think it works. I would imagine that it
Yeah,
still
it could work.
works
Yeah,
on a basic
yeah,
level.
yeah.
But I think it loses some of its teeth um, without
Without it,
that prior knowledge
yeah.
and that commitment to the show, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, just to kind of piggyback on, I say all that as a way of saying that it does. It's an early example of Star Trek using its continuity and building off of, prior stuff and
Yeah.
not being completely episodic without any ties to anything that's come before.
Yeah.
Star Trek's obviously moved in that direction in a big way over the years up till now. But even going back to 1990 with yesterday's Enterprise, there were the early steps in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have Rob in the chat. Hey, Rob, I hope you're doing
Hey, Rob.
well.
Good to see you.
Hanging in there. Yep. What about you? I know your rewatch is going to kind of tie into our greater topic today.
Yeah. So
I guess we can maybe.
if
I'm
you
curious about where you are exactly.
If you guys wonder, like how we come up with topics, it's generally a few of them do stem from our rewatches, right? So, as long as we're rewatching, we'll have topics, and as long as we're doing this, we'll be rewatching. So, that's where that kind of stems from. I believe last time we talked, I was still in season 2, but it was planning on being done. I think I had
2 or 3 episodes left.
Yeah, I think I had 2 episodes left.
2, I think it was 2.
Finished those, and now I'm 5 episodes into the 3rd season. So
Nice.
I got a little bit of a taste of season 3. But yeah, I think yeah, that's kind of I'll save the season 2 talk for the main topic. But season 3, 5 episodes in, a little bit of a rough go. Kicking off with Spock's brain, really rough, and then moving on to the Enterprise incident. It's definitely a tale of 2 episodes because I love the Enterprise incident and it's so good.
You can get whiplash there. Those 2.
And it's maybe because I like it so much is because it's mirrored up with Spock's brain.
Yeah, it helps it.
It definitely helps it for sure, but. Kind of the rest, the Paradise Syndrome and The Children Shall Lead. It's just a really, really mixed bag of middle of the road kind of stinkers, I would say. I'm trying not to be too harsh, but it's definitely been a tough go of it.
And The Children Shall Lead, I think, is in the running for worst episode of all time. I think it's one of the worst.
It's definitely it was hard to get through. Luckily, it was
that's kind of its trademark.
Yeah, but
not incredibly watchable.
Yeah. Let's get into the topic at hand so I can kind of unlock season 1 and 2 a little bit. But
sure.
Yeah. So we're talking about the differences between season 1 and season 2. It kind of falls perfect because I just finished those. It's really fresh in my mind. And it's also, I really enjoy TOS, so I'm excited to kind of talk about this topic. So,
right,
yeah,
I'm curious.
I think
curious to get your thoughts as somebody who's just out of it. Yeah.
I think it's it's a fun thing to talk about because I think both seasons are maybe quoted a little bit higher than other seasons in other series. So it's gonna be fun to kind of talk about that. But um, I guess I'll just jump right into it. The first thing I really noticed
Mm-hmm.
between the two seasons is really the consistency. I think that's what kind of differentiates the two seasons. When I look back and I think about the episodes in each season and what makes a good season. So I think that's what makes a good season. And right now, coming off of it, I would say I like season two more. Um,
Okay.
but it's tough because that's I think there are some classic episodes in season two or season one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think overall, as a season or as a complete season, as complete episodes, I feel like season two is a little bit more consistent. And but I could be totally wrong. I could be totally off.
No, that's your
Yeah,
take. I mean, that's how you took them,
yeah,
and I don't think there's any right or wrong about it.
yeah,
I think, in my opinion, I think the way I've always kind of looked at it is I think season one has fewer misfires, like downright misfires. I can think of one, maybe two, that I would maybe call
mm-hmm.
like down like real swings and misses.
Yeah.
Where season two there may be a few more.
Got it.
So as far as the consistency goes, I might lean more towards season one,
Gotcha.
but I feel like season two has real. I mean, season one has some of the best episodes as well. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's probably. I would say like if I took a top 10 list, it's probably split pretty evenly. Like my own personal top 10, there's probably five from season one, five from season two,
Yeah.
maybe six and four. Like there's not a heavy leaning either way. They both
Uh-huh.
have real classics that represent the best of TOS in my book. But I think what season two has that season one maybe doesn't is it by season two they've really kind of nailed the formula. It's really evolved into this show about the trio. They've gotten it down to the point where um, that concept that the way that they're handling those three characters is really comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
The actors are completely in the swing of with their performances, and I guess what I'm trying to say is season two represents the show as I think people remember it. Like if people kind of in a nutshell try to sum up the original series, it's those three guys, you know, dealing with landing party missions, away missions, going on planets, and
Yeah.
dealing with crisis of the week. Like season two is full of episodes that are essentially that, and so season two is sort of the perfect amalgamation of what TOS is kind of built to be,
Yeah.
or the sort of the peak of the concept coming together and them finding a groove with what became the lasting legacy of the show. Uh, so season one, I feel like, and I've talked about this before too, especially in the first half of season one, I think the show hasn't quite found the voice that it finds itself, you know, in a comfort zone with. Like the first half of season one is much more serious, much more grounded,
Yeah.
a little darker, less humor. When Roddenberry was legitimately running the show before Gene Kuhn came in and really became the head writer for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So season one's tone is less consistent. The show is still clearly finding itself as any show kind of does in the first season,
Mm-hmm.
where season two doesn't have that sort of shift in tone and approach. Uh, but I think when I think of season one, I do think of consistency
Okay.
for myself.
Yeah.
With Penske file in the room, saying season two is the show getting a bit more experimental, which has both good and bad results. Season one is TOS's best season because of the purity of the concept, and it has the scripts that people remember. Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
season two, I find, I'm trying to think back. Season two, more experimental, perhaps. I think some of the concepts, the episodes get a little bit um, ambitious, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think the formula is more comfortable than in season one. I think in season one they don't quite know, at least
Mm-hmm.
for the first half of it at least, they don't have a comfortable um, lane to be in quite yet. They're a little bit still finding themselves.
Yeah.
I don't think in the first half of the first season, Dr. McCoy is as integrated into the main thrust of the stories as often. Some episodes, sure, he's a big part of it, but he's not in the main credits yet. They haven't quite landed on that idea yet. It's like the triangle.
Yeah.
I think by about halfway through the season, they're starting to get there, and by season 2, it's certainly that's the show.
That's the show. It's a big three.
Right. I mean, what about? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't know. You're not done the show yet. I know you don't have like a top 10 list or anything like that. But if I were to ask you to like start rattling off the episodes that you've genuinely loved and like would call, like not I'm not asking you to name episodes or anything like that. But do you think it would be like a 60-40 kind of a thing? Do you think it's like how widely?
I think it would be pretty even. Now that I think about it, it would be pretty even as far as episodes, but. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna start rattling off. I could, but
yeah, I don't want you to. We'll save that for another time.
Yeah, but
I'm just generally like,
it's amazing because when I look back at other shows in their season 1 and season 2, do you have the same kind of feeling? I know this is TOS is a little bit different because it has such a smaller sample size, but look back at other shows, season 1 and season 2, and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, most of the other shows, TNG.
Is there a handful of classics, and
small handful? In my opinion, there would be a small handful, maybe one. There would be one. Measure of a Man would be in my top 10, but aside from that, probably there wouldn't be anything else. And Deep Space Nine, kind of the same thing. I put Duet in my top 10, but other than that, I think most of the upper echelon of episodes is coming from the later seasons, and I think that pretty much holds true for Voyager as well. Enterprise, like TOS, a little different in that it's a little bit of a shorter sample size, not 7 seasons, 4 and 3 in the case of TOS. So TOS is definitely an anomaly as far as like, the structure of the show. With that, we're kind of used to in the 24th century shows where the first couple seasons are a step down maybe from the bulk of the rest of the show. But that's what's interesting about TOS is it's kind of its own thing, and it's kind of the reverse. I think the first seasons are a clear step ahead of what you're getting into now, third season, which is a little bit less consistent.
And I think, again, I've talked about this a lot, but I think that's the placement of season, I guess not season 3, but that's maybe why it feels so jarring. I feel like the end of season 2 maybe was a little bit shaky. I'm not as big on, Assignment Earth and a few of those other episodes, but it feels a little bit, really jarring because you go from the highest TOS has ever gotten, in season 2, Trouble Tribbles, and then we come to Spock's Brain, first episode out of the gate. It's tough.
Well, the way that I've always kind of looked at it, especially, so Gene Kuhn came on and wrote episodes like The Devil in the Dark and The Taste of Armageddon.
Yeah.
He was the showrunner from about the halfway point of season 1 until about the halfway point of season 2, at which point he burned out, left the show, and he did some like freelance stuff. He contributed scripts over the course of the latter half of season 2 and into the beginning of season 3. But his show running period was the middle of season 1 through the middle of season 2, and I think that is like the season. Like his
forget season 1, season 2. Think about
it's really like
1.5.
Yeah. It's pretty much like, to me, that's where that, like, in that run there, like from the second half of season 1 to the first half of season 2, that's all encompassing episodes like The Devil in the Dark, The City on the Edge of Forever, the Side of Paradise, Amok Time, Journey to Babel, Doomsday Machine, Mirror Mirror. Like that's all coming in the Gene Kuhn era period. And what you're mentioning here, that back half of season 2, when he's left, the producer's name is John Meredith Lucas, who kind of stepped up and finished off season 2 with. There are some highlights there. I really like The Ultimate Computer, but that's in that period. That's when you're getting, A Private Little War, Wonderfully Odd episode, Penske cites in season 2. But episodes like that, Return to Tomorrow, Patterns of Force, like that run, Ultimate Computer, the Omega Glory, Assignment Earth, all that comes in the period after Gene Kuhn has kind of left the show. So the kind of hidden season there, I think, is the Gene Kuhn year.
Hmm.
which kind of slices through the first half of season 2 back to the back half of season 1, which is kind of a different way to look at it. But I
Yeah.
think that's if you want to nail down the best period of TOS, I think it's that.
But I don't think those episodes are necessarily bad. I just think that
No, no,
again,
there's a lot of
the just the placement. I can think of worse episodes in other shows
oh
that
sure.
I would rather watch these than those. But um,
Hmm.
I think again with the placement, I think. Um, but again, it's also you could go you are what you are around maybe. So it yeah
Hmm.
we could go either way there. But
Right. Well, I think the consistency is what is there in that Gene Coon period
yeah.
in the middle of the seasons up until the middle parts of So I think that's where you get the consistency, and I think the consistency sort of falls off. Where there's certainly good stuff. The show has a degree of confidence,
Hmm.
especially in the back half of season 2, with episodes like Private Little War, which, like Penske says, if you're talking about like kind of ambitious, experimental, kind of oddball episodes that try to be different, that try to stretch the formula a little bit, I think Private Little War does that.
Yeah.
I think that episode works because it's different, and the show's confident enough to try that and do that. So there's a lot of good stuff that
Hmm.
comes in the back half of season 2 after Gene Coon's left, and it's a step up from season 3. I think the show is more confident and more running on all cylinders at the back half of season 2 than it is in season 3.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think it's as consistently churning out the landmark episodes that people kind of cite as this is TOS. This is what I remember about TOS.
Hmm.
This is TOS operating at its peak quite as often. And
Yeah.
to be honest, I don't know that I would. I don't think there is an episode in that back half of season 2 that is at the same level of quality as things like Mirror Mirror and Journey to Babel and Amok Time from the
Right.
first half of season 2.
Yeah.
Um, in my opinion, personal preference. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think even season structure, like I feel like, I don't know. If you switch it around, let's say Assignment Earth is the first episode, um, and then you get that greater back half of episodes in the back. I feel like um, the last handful of episodes in a season, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like for me, what I've noticed is really determined the. Um,
It's the taste that's left in your
yeah,
mouth when it's
exactly.
over.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
And season 1 ends so strongly with that run of episodes at the end there.
yeah, it's hard to compete.
They'll turn it effective.
Season
Yeah, right.
one.
And then season 2 kind of
Yeah,
I don't want to say it sputters out, but it doesn't end with the same sense of urgency with the classic level episodes
because you
that
got
season 1
City
does,
on the
which I do
Edge at
think.
the end, right, of season one.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I
yeah,
mean,
right
it's
at the
just like
end with one to go.
people have quoted that as the best episode of all time. Uh,
Right, very often, yeah. And even a couple episodes before that, you get The Devil in the Dark, you get Aaron to Mercy with the
yeah, it's
introduction of
such a strong back half.
season 1, just bang, bang,
It's
bang.
tough.
And, and I think because season 2 starts so strongly, kind of mirroring the end of season 1,
Yeah.
the ending of season 2, where it's it's not weak. I wouldn't call it weak.
No, 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 no.
It's churning out like solid episodes that
Yeah.
are perfectly watchable. That like Penske says, and I would agree. There are episodes that have some ambitiousness
Mhm.
to them. I think Return to Tomorrow is kind of bold concept. Um, that I think that's a great one. Um, but I don't think it has that level of consistency that the opening of the season does, which
Yeah.
is a unique contrast.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing, I think season 2, especially in that back half, like from the middle part of it to the end,
Mhm.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but I think that's when you get a lot of the sort of like parallel Earth idea kind of episodes. Um,
Yeah, there is a
episodes like
lot of
Patterns of
similarity.
Force.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of humanoid interaction. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being down to a planet, and it's sort of a spin on Earth's history kind of
Yeah.
idea. You get bread and circuses with the ancient Rome, never died.
Yeah.
Patterns of Force with they all have different spins to the concepts. They have different
Yeah.
reasons for kind of going that route. But I do always feel like by the end of season 2, I'm kind of I'll say getting tired of those episodes, but it's like, oh, it's these episodes. It's the
Yeah,
ones that
yeah, yeah.
are doing the parallel Earth idea. They're certainly there in season 1. There are episodes that do it like kind of haphazardly with like Miri. There's a little bit of it. It's literally a parallel Earth in Miri. They don't really do anything with that idea, but it's a parallel. The idea is there to have this be like another Earth. But in season 2, they really kind of lean into that. A lot of them, and for obvious production reasons, that's kind of the way they went to justify the similar, architecture and being able to use Hollywood backlots, Paramount backlots and stuff. So that was their way around that, and the way to justify it. And I certainly get that. And they found to mixed results, interesting ways to kind of justify it and make those concepts work. Some of them work better than others, but in the back half of season 2, there is a sort of one after another feel in my mind with them. The other thing that I think season 2 kind of has that season 1 doesn't is season 2 has kind of a kind of not a high number, but there's Trouble with Tribbles, there's I Mud, there's a piece of the action, like real comedies.
Quote unquote comedies. Yep. Yeah,
yeah,
I did
really
notice
lean into
that.
the comedy.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of it's just a natural progression of getting away from the seriousness of really early TOS. I love to see that they're going kind of the other direction with having some comedy, moments in episodes to where this is more a comedy episode, a central idea about this. So. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that.
Look at like the Harry Mudd is a character that's featured in Mudd's Women, which is an episode that is not certainly not very well liked these days. But look at the way that character's treated in Mudd's Women as opposed to I'm Mudd. And I think he kind of gets lumped together as a kind of comedic character.
Yeah.
And he's certainly a campy character. But he's much more menacing in Mudd's Women. It's much less played for laughs and comedy. Like he's goofy and silly, but it's not played as a comedy in Mudd's Women at all. It's really more played as like or really leaning into the Western idea that is kind of the background of the show. But in I'm Mudd, it's much more played for laughs, and he's much more silly and I think just being played for comedy. So that I think is kind of indicative of the difference in the tone of the show from like that beginning of season 1 when Roddenberry's really running the show to what the show kind of ultimately becomes as it evolves into a much less self-serious, everything's dire kind of tone. Season 2, Rob mentions that we get Chekhov introduced. He's not in the first season, which is definitely the case. He adds a unique flavor, a younger voice to the crew. He gets a decent amount to do. I mean, he's not anywhere near the level of Kirk, Spock, McCoy, or even Scotty. But he when he's on, he gets a little bit more than Sulu does. They definitely like to use him as sort of the analog for, like, I think the younger audience that was watching at the time and still watching today, I think.
Because I think he's, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's really a part of the episode, the Deadly Years, or when they're really old. And Chekhov is not aging, and
he's not.
And
that's kind of what's different about him. They're kind of poking and prodding him to figure out what made him not just the virus.
So I felt like that was also because they brought a younger crew member on. It was more or less. So I thought that was kind of funny that they're doing an episode about how all these actors are older, getting older, and he's not. So I thought that was a little bit
true.
But, yeah.
No, he's involved in that one. He's involved in got his. He's pining after a yeoman on a landing party mission in the Apple. But I think he does bring a different kind of vibe to the show. I think his presence does change the dynamic a little bit. He's not in every episode, and not every episode he has more to do other than to kind of sit there and turn and look at the captain and, you know, course plotted captain
Yeah.
kind of lines. Like not every episode he's super involved, but when he is, when he gets to do a little something, I think he does change the vibe of the show a little bit. And usually, I think for the better. It gives it balances it out a little bit, and I think he adds some comedy to it and some lightness and levity to it. Yeah. And if you think about it, that's something that I think throughout the show. I think in most of the other series leading up through Discovery, I think each show has kind of tried to inject like a younger person, a younger crewman who's more green and isn't a competent officer who knows what they're doing. You get Hoshi Sato, you get Tilly, even Bashir in Deep Space Nine early on. I think try to be spins on this. So the Chekhov idea is something that kind of echoes through the rest of Star Trek.
Yeah.
So there's a legacy there that he brings to the table. So excellent point, Rob. He also mentions we're introduced to the Mirror Universe in season 2.
I feel like
there are things in season 2.
Yeah, that kind of falls into the bigger ambitious ideas in season 2. It was a Mirror Universe. It's kind of like a mirror humor, like how they have the similar Earth, episodes. This is like a similar Earth on the ship, but a little bit
exactly.
Different.
Yeah, it's true. I hadn't thought about the kind of mirroring. Echo there with the other Earths.
Which again, it saves production design, and all they do is just kind of redress all these sets. But
exactly, right.
Which makes sense, but
it does, especially given their limitations and even in the '90s tracks with Rick Berman running the show, they were always finding ways to redress and reuse old sets, and TOS did it their own way, and So, Rob also says, to him, season 1 has bigger classics. City on the Edge of Forever, Devil in the Dark, etc. Balance of Terror is another one that we get in season 1 that I think really kind of holds up. Penske Files asking us to name overrated, underrated episodes from each season. Trying to think. For me, we're talking underrated from season 2, I would go with Return to Tomorrow.
That's what I was gonna quote. I think if that's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Trying to think what else from season 1. Underrated. I really like The Conscience of the King. That one always kind of works for me. I think Shore Leave's a little overrated. I don't dislike it. And it certainly is, to me, kind of like the first indication that we're stepping into that less self-serious, less dire tone that I think becomes its trademark in season 2. And it's sort of the first, I think, comedy. And I guess I don't know how underrated it is, but an episode that I don't think gets cited enough as a real classic and like a landmark, like This Is Star Trek episode, is the Corbomite Maneuver. I think that's about as perfect as it gets, as really the first, other than the pilots, episode produced. I think that's one that kind of works as This Is Star Trek in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It embodies the ideals that it wants to push forward and present with the way Kirk handles that crisis, and it presents an adversary that's not a villain so much as an obstacle to be understood. So I would say the Corbomite Maneuver might be my underrated choice from the first season. And I agree. Penske Files says underrated Corbomite and overrated Shore Leave for season 1. That's probably what I would go to as well. You have anything you want to throw out there?
I'm scared to do it. I'm scared because it might be a stinker. So, I'll just add this. A guilty pleasure of mine was A Piece of the Action. I think that was just such a.
It's great.
a fun little, um, you know, improvisation with, between Kirk and Spock. I think that was really fun. I think that the set design, the costume design, all the design stuff was really fun.
Yeah.
Um, that's one thing that I'll mention. That's one of the things that I remember. Such a fun episode.
Piece of the action.
And it's I wouldn't necessarily call that a comedy episode, but I think there are some great comedy moments in that episode as well. So
There are.
yeah,
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. I'd be comfortable calling it a comedy. But
yeah,
I think even if you, whatever you want to call it, I think it's one
yeah,
of the funnier episodes
yeah.
of the whole run.
Mhm.
For season 2, he says Trouble at Tribbles overrated, which I don't necessarily agree with. Underrated, A Private Little War, and Obsession. I think they are both underrated. I really like Obsession. I like the way Obsession builds Kirk's backstory a little bit. I like the way that leans into a continuity kind of
Yeah,
idea. It
yeah,
talks about things that happened before we saw the show. It's not quite as in a bottle. Like, this is all we get this episode today. The way that, not quite to the extent that like the Menagerie does with building a backstory and you know what happened before, kind of history stuff. But the Obsession does a little bit of it, and I really like that. And I like the way the Obsession deals with. It really builds on. It gives us a fully fleshed out, not fully fleshed out, but they really lean the episode into like a junior officer who's just a
yeah. I was
security
just gonna
guard
say
on the
that.
ship, like
Yeah,
that has a history and his dad was in Starfleet. Like, we get a little bit of that, and that's such a we get so much of that in Trek forward. It's sort of an early example of that kind of thing. I
yeah,
really like Obsession.
yeah. Just like to see the eager beaver, the really green horde, really wanting to do what he
Yeah.
can. I thought that was really cool to see in that episode. But
Mm-hmm. Oh, and he met Metamorphosis and not Obsession. Metamorphosis is another one that I actually really like. You remember that one? That's the Zephyr Cochrane.
yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's a good one. I like that
yeah, I think
a lot, actually.
yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. I'm not like really high on it. I'm like
Mm-hmm.
probably B
A little more
minus.
mixed.
Yeah, a
B
little bit more
minus.
mixed.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I like the. Good.
yeah. What are you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, in Metamorphosis, one of my favorite things about Metamorphosis is like the production design, the cinematography. I think we talked about this on it. Maybe when you rewatched it, we talked a little bit about it. So I'm repeating myself, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
there's some really unique stuff done with the photography of that planet set that give it real depth and make it feel big, and I think that works really well with that story. The
Yeah,
maroon.
it plays into the premise, right? It's the emptiness. Yeah.
Yes, it really gives them a sense of like, this is like, we're alone here on this planet, and
Mm-hmm.
we're out in the far reaches with no real hope for help. It looks beautiful for sure. There's some really memorable shots there, really well directed, really well shot. Yeah, I think that's one of the more visually interesting episodes of the series that doesn't get enough pub. So yeah, definitely a good call there. That's, to me, for my money, that's an underrated episode as well. Anything else you want to throw out there?
I don't know. I don't think that I do. I will say that it's the I don't even know why it is. I think it's just me personally, but TOS is such a comforting, warm blanket, and I think that's really what I needed right now. And I think it was really perfectly timed. Just for why is it so comforting? Well, because I take comfort in older things. I like old films, old just old stuff. I think in what's been going on with me, and then also with this coronavirus, I think that it's I don't, we might get demonetized if I say that, but which we're not even monetized. I'm just joking around, but with what's been going on just with everything, I think it's just perfect, and I really love TOS. So
yeah, no, I definitely think that they're one of the best assets that TOS has after all these years is I think it has that. And I think a lot of it comes from kind of what we were talking about, that lack of self seriousness. That I think it embraces the.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it embraces the camp. Sometimes it does. Sometimes I think
But
that's
sometimes camp is a little bit of camp is okay, right?
a little bit of camp's perfectly fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I do think it helps the show hold up. I think it gives it a levity and there's a funness to it and there's a warmth to it and an optimism to it
Hmm.
that is kind of synonymous with what Star Trek tries to be. It's certainly evolved over the years and shifted its way of trying to talk about those kinds of things. But
Hmm.
um, I think TOS in its most pure form is a warm blanket, and it works for me that way too. It is very comforting and a relaxing thing to watch. It's pretty stress free and
Hmm.
uh, makes me feel good about life and
Yeah.
liking Star Trek.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess I'll move away from the TOS topic because I want to talk about a few things that's kind of related to Star Trek content. So,
Sure.
if you guys have any questions about TOS in chat, we can definitely answer those. Um, but I think Bill and I are going to move on. And
Sure.
if you have a bigger question, maybe you want to see how season 3 stacks up, um, we'll do probably an episode on that as well. Um, Something I want to talk about Star Trek content. I think there's a moment when I reach a threshold of where listening to recaps of maybe Discovery and maybe Star Trek Picard, where it gets a little bit divisive, but listening to other people's takes on it. And I think that's the moment where I have to maybe say, okay, I'm going to take a step back from all this. Because as much as I really want to just argue and stir the pot, I think it's important to remember that not everyone likes it and not everyone shares your opinion, but that's really the beauty of it. So it really came to a head, I think, on one of a very beloved podcast, The Ready Room. I think it was again. I was getting a little bit frustrated with just how they were talking about it, but I went through this similarly with Discovery, and I said, okay, this is where I have to take a step back a little bit. So I think this self-awareness is good for us as viewers and us as fans. So just remember that everyone's entitled to their opinion. I think that's what makes this whole thing great is we can kind of discuss each other's opinions. Everyone likes season 1. I prefer season 2 of TOS. That's fine. That's great. It's fun to talk about. I love Picard. Some people might not be too hot on it and stuff like that, and same with Discovery. So just remember that, because I did find myself being a little bit disgruntled.
Discouraged.
Yeah, discouraged a little bit.
Sure.
But again, it's you gotta. There's things to remember in this kind of climate. So
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of like you said, know when to take a step back and know how to listen. Take other people's opinions, for what they are, and they can inform your own, give added color to the way you see it. But don't allow whichever side of the spectrum you're on. If you're not as every fiber of your being tells you that this isn't working for you and it's not successful, then don't be discouraged by the loud voices that say it's the greatest thing ever, and
yeah,
vice versa. It goes both ways. So don't allow. That's what I try to do. Don't allow other takes to cloud your own.
yeah. And the Pensky file makes a good point as well. Makes some interesting points. I think it does. It's nice to have a little dose of reality because I feel like I can get a little bit of on cloud 9. So it's nice to be able to see
Sure.
it a little bit more objectively. I'll try to do a spin as positive spin on that. So
Yeah, no, I have to be honest with you, I haven't
okay,
I've been crazy busy
yeah,
with work, and my my podcasting time has been pretty reduced over the past week or so. So I'm a little behind on things, but I gathered sort of the gist of what was said on that podcast. I'm looking forward to listening to it, and I'm sure they're very valid points. Just the same,
Yes.
like Penske points when he talks about the show. Well documented, and I respect his take as much as anybody's. I don't always agree, but yeah, it is what it is. I mean, it's important to hear these things, but not allow them to sway your own opinion either way. You know, you gotta watch with your own eyes and let the show kind of sit with you and evolve, and you'll come to your own conclusion over time, and your opinion will naturally shift, I'm sure, as time goes on, and rewatch and be confident in your own, your own take. Don't allow other people's to, bombard you into thinking one way or the other. Yeah.
Yep. Real quick too, one last thing. I did post on Twitter the this is just the related to Star Trek content. This is not, but the Pacific 201 trailer. Definitely, I think this is one of the besides Axonar, probably the longest running fan film that I've been following for the longest time. I should say it's not the longest fan film. It's the
it's been in the pipeline
for a while. So we've been following it for a long time. So definitely encourage you to check that out because it looks pretty cool and pretty interesting. So
yeah, I've been excited about Pacific 201 going back years and years and years, really. So he's got a cool YouTube channel as well where he talks about all kinds of things, Star Trek and otherwise. EC Henry, find him. He does a lot of good work. So I root for him. I hope that things are going well in that production and it comes out and makes people happy. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So I'll echo you there. I also watched that and thought it was cool. I don't have a whole lot of Star Trek podcast stuff to share. Like I said, I've even on, like I've said, or I do tend to listen to some of the on kind of a rotating basis, different shows, different weeks, sometimes reactions to Picard and things like that. But this week it's been pretty busy, so I haven't done a whole lot of that. So I don't have a ton to share. I'll piggyback on you with everything you said on how to consume that, but I would how I try to do it as well. And the Pacific 201 trailer is definitely to see. The other, I will actually throw one thing out there. There's a podcast called Inglorious Trexperts. I don't know if you've ever heard of them or seen any of their stuff. I listen to them on and off. Mark A. Altman is the main host, who has written some books on Trek over the years, lots of books on Trek. He was an editor for Cinema Fantastique, I think it was called, a magazine that covered sci-fi television movies back in the 90s. He's written a ton of Star Trek stuff over the years. They interviewed Anson Mount the other day. And it's actually pretty good. It's not the guys who host the show are not huge Discovery fans.
Gotcha.
So, but I think they do a really nice job interviewing him as people who don't even necessarily love the show. They talk a lot about his career and his take on Discovery and his time on the show, as well as other things he's done. And it's worth a listen for sure. So I recommend that.
Yeah. And there was also a really funny, not funny, but a really cool clip. I'm not sure who tweeted it first. I saw Trek Culture tweeted. It was this a recut of the monologue with Picard talking about Data. And they cut in old clips. Oh, that was great. So I don't know who to quote, who did that, but I saw it on Trek Culture, so I'll point there. But that's also some Star Trek content that you should look at. Speaking of Star Trek content, the content or the discussion does not have to stop here. Come over to Facebook, Twitter. Bill has an Instagram, and the Discord server, the big ones. I think we're gonna call it on Star Trek content this weekend. I think core setting was a big question mark. I think we're gonna save that till next week, and maybe do a little bit longer of a show because it's been a while since Bill or I have talked about, I think, 2 episodes now. So we're getting
Yeah,
a little bit behind, but
I think that's the way to do it.
we
Though
got a
we'll
lot.
do another episode and cover the ones we've missed and talk about each one and get caught up.
Yep. But if you have questions, I would, or if you want to talk about it, maybe off air, come over to Discord or Twitter, and we can talk about it there. So,
For sure.
until next week. This has been episode 120 of Trek Live. We will be back next week. We have a topic. It is escaping me right now, but we do have a topic.
Yeah, we'll have to.
Yeah.
We'll put that out in
Yep.
the coming days.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's good to be back. Look forward to seeing you guys next weekend and throughout the week, keeping this guys going.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.